Thank you for joining, I think, the first virtual workshop that we've had with the Alliance. And the focus of today's workshop is really around the data platform. As you will have noticed and on the slide, the meeting is being recorded and will be shared on the Tampa Bay Smart Cities Alliance website as well. So in terms of the agenda, Johnny is going to provide an update on the work that Hillsborough MPO have been doing on the platform, give an overview and particularly look at some of the user cases that they've been developing. And then Cheryl from the City of St. Petersburg will talk about some particular issues or challenges that they have around data and maybe how the platform can help. And similarly with Chelsea as well from Forward Pinellas. Before the second part of the agenda is really focused on the theme leads providing an update on some of the work that's gone on over the last 3 months. So without further ado, I will head it over to Johnny and Phil to drive the slides. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Can you all hear me? I'm going to continue talking anyway, so if you can't hear me, just send me a message. Johnny Wong.
You are good to go.
All right, that sounds great, thanks. Johnny Wong, I work for the Hillsborough MPO. I am part of the data platform working group for the Smart Cities Alliance, and we've been working on getting this data platform operational. I guess the entire timeline covers a little bit more than 3 years, but we've had the tool up and running since November of last year. And I'm gonna go through some of the updates that we've made to the tool and also cover some use cases and then finally talk about next steps before I turn it over to Cheryl. So like I said, we've had the platform operational for about 6 months, and even in that short period of time, we've gotten a lot of value from it. We wouldn't have expected that it would have paid the dividend so soon, particularly in a time where there's not a ton of plans moving forward, but we found a way to integrate the data into our analyses that we're doing. And thus far, we've concluded that it saved us a ton of time. One of the earliest use cases that we identified for the data platform for the MPO is that we're coming up on the midterms for our travel time reliability targets, and we're gonna be using ClearGuide to update our performance data that supports those targets. In the past, we had to use some of the free tools that were available to MPOs, and using those tools, calculating travel time reliability on just the NHS could take multiple days. But with the ClearGuide platform, we've reduced that time to only about a few minutes. Moving forward, when we start to kick off new plans, we're expecting that it's gonna generate even greater time savings for the agency because we won't have to work across platforms to generate crash and congestion and incident data. All of those data sets will be centralized in this one location. Some of the other benefits that we've gotten out of ClearGuide is unifying methodologies for calculating some congestion-related metrics. All of those methodologies are built into the platform. So if multiple agencies, multiple staff members are working on a project, there's little to no chance that those individuals will be making an accounting error because all of the work is done behind the scenes, and that produces error-free analyses. So we're expecting that our analysis will always be consistent and accurate. Another benefit of having a centralized system is for all of our partner agencies and consultants, preventing duplicate data production and collection. One of the first things that we identified, or one of the first benefits of having a shared data platform that we realized, is that we won't have to deal with multiple data sets floating around the county, and without multiple agencies collecting those data sets, that'll free some agencies up to invest in new data sources. One of the last reasons that we chose to invest in the data and analytics platform is because the MPOs have been talking about tracking regional performance and sharing data for years, and this platform makes it very easy to do that. Next slide, please. I'll spare you some of the sales pitch language, but only want to reinforce that we've gotten a lot of value from this tool in a very short period of time, and I'm going to share some of the details of those use cases with you moving forward. Next slide, please. For a little bit of background on the platform itself, we have integrated real-time contextual mobility intelligence. What that means is that we're powering it with HERE data. That HERE data has been provided to us for free by central office, and we're very grateful for that. The data set is real-time. All of the data can be binned in 5, 15, or 60-minute intervals for operational analyses. It can also be binned at the time frame of a day, a year, or even longer for planning purposes. Next slide. For this presentation, I chose not to do a live demo because we presented this tool to stakeholders multiple times in the past. And for some reason, that seems to be the only time that the platform lags. And so it's never quite as impressive in a virtual setting as it is in person. I just want to show you that when you click onto the ClearGuide website, you're greeted with a map of Hillsborough County because our data is only populating that county at the moment. And so this is what you see, a real-time map of traffic across the network. From this view, you can hover over any segment that's colored, and with your mouse, it'll show you current performance as well as historical average over the past 30 days for the same day and time that you happen to be looking at it. So if I were to hover my mouse over one of the colored segments right now on Wednesday, May 27th at 1 p.m., I'd be able to see data spanning back to April 27th at 1 p.m. The timeline that you can see in the upper left-hand corner of the screen can be adjusted so that you can see what the performance is over a specific date and at a specific time. And there is a little icon to the right of the timeline slider bar. If you click that, that plays an animation so you can see what's going on the network over a period of time. And it plays a short video showing you what the network effects are of, say, an incident that occurs on 275. You can see traffic backing up after that time period, and also how traffic distributes across the network away from the interstate. Data is not limited to just the roads that are colored in now. If this were a live demo and you wanted to zoom in, you would also see that there's data available on lower classification roads. So it's not only limited to interstates and arterials. You can actually dig down with considerable detail. Next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of the time that's required to do these kind of analyses. This morning, I was testing it out. I did a performance report for about 18 3-mile segments. I looked at about a year's worth of data that was binned hourly, and it took about 13 minutes to generate the report. At the top of the screen, you can see that there are different time periods that you can look at, going all the way down from a day up to a year. If you want to look at multiple years, that's available upon request. That's not something that's needed on a regular basis, but the consultants at Iteris have been very kind in working with me to generate that data. We're actually looking at 5 years of historical data to update our travel time reliability performance targets. If you scroll down or if you look at the screen just below the time ranges, there are 3 metrics that you can select. So you're able to run analyses on 3 congestion-related metrics at a given time. And if you were to click on that drop-down menu, you'd see that there are 20 different congestion-oriented metrics available. 3 of them are more so related to data quality. So in effect, we have 17 that are congestion-related. And then, of course, you can select the routes that you want to analyze and run the report. Next slide, please. This slide is just kind of recapping everything that I mentioned. I don't think that there's anything else useful on there. I will provide you all with a sample of the map animations at a later date. Next slide, please. And as far as use cases, being the MPO, being our long-range planning organization or long-range planning agency, most of our use cases are, of course, related to planning. some of the things that we've used this for are project comparison, selection, prioritization. We're actually using this tool to calculate reliability and delay. We look at both of those metrics to prioritize congestion projects in our transportation improvement program. One of the benefits of using this tool for that kind of purpose is that performance reporting is built into the platform, so we can quickly produce the required performance data for, say, MAP 21 targets. Another benefit is that all of the information in this tool is exportable in multiple formats. So getting prepared for today, as an example, it was really easy to export this data in JPEG so that I could just drop it into the PowerPoint. You can also pull it out as Excel or just view it in the tool. Next slide, please. We've recently approved access for some consultants who are working on Vision Zero corridor analyses. Those consultants are looking to relate crash trends with speed conditions. This specific example of overlaying crash and incident data with speed and reliability data is going to be much easier in the very near future. We just recently kicked off a work order to integrate Waze data and CDMS, which is our local crash database data, into the platform, so it'll be more or less a one-stop shop. Next slide, please. Recently, due to the COVID pandemic and the stay-at-home orders which followed, we've received a lot of partner and media requests for before and after data on related to speeding and congestion. Bayshore Boulevard especially has generated a lot of interest from the media, and we've been able to provide info to reporters and to our partner agencies in just a matter of minutes, as opposed to multiple hours in the past. For that performance target update, we're in the process of feeding the platform NPM RDS data so that we can review the level of travel time reliability targets that our board set in 2018. Using that data set, it's going to be possible for those targets to be revised to account for our performance over the past 2 years. Back when we set the targets in 2018, our data sources were limited to what was available to us for free. We were able to access raw NPM RDS data, but anyone who's worked with that data set knows that it requires a lot of cleanup. We were more or less limited to seeing what reliability is on the NHS system. So our performance was limited to the interstates and other large arterials. But with the HERE data, we're able to access we're able to view a clearer picture of how the entire network is performing and what happens when traffic is diverting from the NHS onto smaller roads to serve as an alternative. Next slide, please. Again, all this information is available to our partner agencies. Thus far, it's really been up to each agency to determine how to synthesize and communicate all of this data to legislators, board members, and the public. In the future, we're anticipating that this is going to be easier because we're exploring the possibility of integrating a public-facing digital dashboard so that members of the public, legislative staff, board members will be able to just go on to a freestanding website and view it on their own. Of course, that requires a little bit of interpretation, but it'll remove the onus of the agency and the data stewards of making that interpretation every single time data is being requested from us. Next slide, please. All right, so no further ado, I'm going to walk through some use cases that have been collected by our consultants. And most of these examples come from other Iteris clients in other states. So I'm a little bit less familiar with these, but if you have any questions about these specific cases, we're going to provide you with contacts for follow-up at the end of the presentation. All right, so the first planning case is exploratory, and this is coming to you from my agency, the Hillsborough MPO. We've been experimenting with creating a corollary to our top 20 Vision Zero corridors. The top 20 Vision Zero corridor list represents the 20 most dangerous corridors in Hillsborough County based on crashes per mile, paying special attention to fatal injury crashes. And so The corollary to this list for congestion is tentatively titled the top 20 most miserable commutes. As part of our long-range plan update that we just finished this past November, we identified job clusters across the county, and we called them key economic spaces. Across the county, we have about 15 key economic spaces, and those include the employment destinations that you would expect, like West Shore, downtown, USF, the airport, and a handful of others. Those specific areas represent some of the highest volume destinations during the AM peak and origins during the PM peak. Next slide, please. So we used that list of key economic spaces, we generated it from the demand model, and we drew routes connecting each key economic space to all of the other key economic spaces. And so what we ended up with is a 15 by 15 OD table. Using each one of those 225 commute routes, we calculated 6 performance measures to back those up during the AM and PM peaks. And we're looking at a methodology for how to weight those so that we can see which of those 225 commuting routes is the worst. This will be particularly important because, as we all know, workers, especially blue-collar workers, tend to suffer the most from having low reliability on their journeys to work. Next slide, please. I don't know, go back up one. I think I skipped it. Well, I forgot to include it, but I'll just wrap up. Once again, this is exploratory. We haven't really identified a process for building this into, let's say, our CMP or our TIP. But it's important for just exploring what are the impacts on journeys to work rather than on individual corridors. So it's kind of useful to think of this as a thought exercise and to consider what the impacts could be of treating only the most highly traveled portions of corridors along commuting routes rather than the entire length of a corridor. All right, next slide, please. All right, a second example of how we're using this tool is simply to better inform the prioritization process. Last November, once we updated our long-range plan, we had a request from a board member to identify some corridors that would be good candidates for TSMO and smart cities type treatments so that we can improve reliability and reduce delay. When we were asked to produce that list, we realized very quickly that the Tampa Bay region has quite a long list of roads that are substandard in those respects. And we realized that over the next 20 or 25 years, we still will not be able to fund all the necessary improvements to bring those roads up to a good performance. So we have to ask ourselves, how can we elevate, or how can we identify which roads should be elevated through the ranks as prime candidates for this kind of funding? So we produced an analysis of future conditions on county roads using a 2045 population and jobs allocation. We took that from the demand model, and we prepared a table like what you see on the screen showing both the current travel time index score as well as the projection of future conditions out to 2045. And it's been really useful for us in telling a story because having access to both that historical data as well as future estimates allows our board members to make the most informed decisions. As you can see from the columns that I highlighted, if you were to prioritize these roads for treatments based on just one data source, you might choose, or based on current data, you might choose either Big Bend or Gibson-Tin. Both of those have a high travel time index score. Big Bend is 1.59 and Gibson-Tin is a 1.64. But if you look at both the current TTI as well as future TTI, you might see that the problem in the future is on 12th Street Northeast and 46th Street Northeast because population and jobs in those areas are expected to increase rapidly over the next 20 years. So those TTI scores by 2045 will actually be higher than what's on Big Bend and Gibsonton Drive right now. Next slide, please. All right, I'll take you through a traffic management example. The Tampa Smart Mobility team recently used ClearGuide to help evaluate some signal retimings that were done in downtown. They took a 4-step process. They began by creating routes across the grid, some extending north past the interstate and others extending east out into the Channel District. Next slide, please. They used the multi-route reporting feature in ClearGuide to assess both travel time and delay before and after the retimings were done along the corridors that are shown on this map. Next slide, please. They segmented the day into 4 periods and reviewed ADT and hourly distributions of traffic to assign volumes to each route. And then they calculated the travel time and delay improvements before and after the retimings were done. And you can see that in the AM and PM peak on most corridors, the percent change in travel time was 8 and 11%, so that's highly positive. And delay increased as well. Delay decreased significantly on those corridors as well. All right, another example from Washington, DC. It's basically the same approach. It's a before and after study for a corridor in DC that's just north of the Anacostia River. Next slide. Rather than producing a table to show performance in the way that the Tampa team did, DC elected to use color contours to show speed on the corridor at each intersection across each hour. Next slide, please. If you're not familiar with reading a contour map, I think that this graph is highly illustrative of what's going on. Click through one more time. So at the very bottom, you can see that across a 6-month period, the average travel time on that corridor was about 4 minutes, and keep clicking through. Following the signal retiming, that dropped about 2 minutes off the average travel time. And you can see that the day after they retimed that signal, a noticeable impact seen on the network. So that's a highly visual, very explanatory way of telling a story to preach the benefits of signal retiming on a particular corridor. Of course, they chose to use contour map and the graph, which is very visual and illustrative. They also have the ability to produce stats in the same way that the city of Tampa did for its signal retiming projects. You can see that the differential in travel time following that retiming increased reliability about 20%. And I think that that was across the entire week, and over weekdays, it was even higher. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. All right, this is a case study from a client to Iteris out in Southern California, looking at the I-405 improvement project, which is one of the largest active design build projects in the US. That interstate is also notorious as being one of the most congested corridors, not only in the state, but across the nation. Upon completion of this project, the project's going to add in additional general purpose lanes in each direction and convert the existing HOV lanes to 2 express lanes each direction along a 16-mile corridor, which is similar in scope and scale to the I-10 project. One of the most challenging aspects of this project is the bridge replacements. In order to replace 18 bridges within 5 years, the DOT had to look at nightly closures of freeway main lines and ramps almost every week of the year, except for holidays. Sometimes that would include 2 or 3 freeway segments closing fully within the corridor on the same night. And the owner and the contractors are always looking for ways to save money and accelerate the schedule by increasing the length of those shifts and reducing the number of shifts for each activity. Next slide, please. Can you click through one more? Sorry, go back. All right, so for a major freeway closure, what would typically be done is that they would set up detour routes in ClearGuide so that DOT staff can monitor area-wide traffic conditions and make field adjustments as necessary. That also allows engineers to monitor traffic remotely so they don't have to be on the scene. Following those closures, they would expect travel time, delay, and queue data, or they would extract travel time, delay, and queue data and evaluate the utilization of each detour route to see which one is being utilized most frequently. And if the closure hours can be adjusted, then those changes would be applied to future closures at the same location. So based on what you see on the screen, or looking at this screen, provides you with an example of how ClearGuide was used to provide support for extending construction hours for a bridge demolition. Next slide, please. ClearGuide was also used to monitor and evaluate traffic conditions following a major traffic divergence and long-term ramp closures. This was done by comparing conditions before construction began and after it initiated to determine if there was an impact, and if so, where that impact is located and how significant it is. So this is a case of having closed an off-ramp, which is the line that's marked in black to the upper left. That off-ramp carries approximately 15,000 vehicles every day, and the closure is scheduled to last 35 days so that construction can begin on pavement. Pavement can be Y'all hear me?
Yes, Johnny, we can still hear you. Just got a couple of minutes available, but yeah, we can still hear
you. I'm actually going to skip through this because it's very detailed. So if you have additional questions on this, I'm going to turn it over to Anita Vanderval from iTerrace, who's our consultant for the project. Just in a nutshell, this tool has been very helpful to our TMCs and the engineers for real-time operations. Not only is this tool providing value to them now, but we anticipate that it's going to be an even better source of value in the future as we incorporate Waze incident data and as we continue to explore bringing in data from the Federal Highway Patrol, or Florida Highway Patrol feed. At present, it allows you to monitor bottlenecks and anomalies in real time. The traffic engineers really like it because they can set alerts specific to each corridor so that if congestion happens to exceed a historical average on a corridor, they can receive an alert to their phone. And even if they're working remotely, they can call up their staff at the TMC and say, hey, something's going on Hillsborough Avenue, for example. Can you look into it and see if we need to address it? Next slide, please. This to look at post-event or to kind of investigate major events after the fact. So we were able to piece together an animations map and sort of deconstruct or replay what occurred on that major incident on I-275, I think last fall. So there was a major incident on Howard Franklin Bridge southbound. An SUV actually flipped over the bridge and fell into the bay, and that caused congestion leading back into Hillsborough, basically covering the entire network for many, many hours. Next slide. When you look at the sequence of events, especially in a real-time animation, you can see that at about 7 a.m., there was a report of the incident, and click through, please. One more slide. The queues on adjacent corridors started to back up as a result of that single incident. So it kind of shows you what's going on the entire network rather than just looking at a single corridor. This is actually a fairly detailed example from Toronto, but we've had similar requests from news media that's local. Following the stay-at-home orders, media caught on fairly quickly that traffic patterns were changing, and they asked us for a lot of data regarding some corridors where there were crashes. And the thoughts were, with so little volume on the network, what is initiating these crashes? So they called us up and asked us to provide them with speed data, and we were able to turn that around in just a matter of minutes. Through to the end, Phil, I'm getting cut off. I see that I've gone past my time. I apologize, everyone. I just get so excited about this tool. I want to keep talking. You can just go to the second to last slide, which is the next steps. I'll breeze through this. So we recently expanded the coverage a little bit outside of Hillsborough County to include the 3 bridges extending from Hillsborough to Pinellas County. So we now have data on Courtney Campbell, Howard Franklin Bridge, and Gandy. We have a work order that we kicked off recently to bring in Waze incident data, crash data from the CDMS database. We're exploring building digital dashboards, and we're probably going to host those on a separate website. Some of our partners have asked us to bring in transit data, explore OD data sets. I know that the city of Tampa maintains some micro-mobility data from bike share and e-scooters that we're considering bringing in the future. The final phase of this project, and this is where the tremendous value element comes in, is that we want to build in a predictive module. We don't want this data portal to be limited only to historical. The final phase is going to be allowing planners to estimate what the impacts will be of certain treatments on certain corridors. We've already gotten commitments from DOT to donate some consultant time to work on this, and we have contacts at Cambridge Systematics who probably will be taking the lead. But in the future, we anticipate that this will provide us with even more value. I apologize for running over time a little bit. This is my contact info. We've done many trainings so far. We're planning on hosting another one in about 4 to 6 weeks once we unveil that Waze and crash data. So if you have any questions and you want to bring specific use cases to that training, write them down and get in contact with either Anita or myself, and we can add you to that list for future training sessions. Thanks.
Thanks, Johnny. That's awesome. It's amazing how far it's come in over those last few months. I'm conscious that Cheryl and Chelsea have a hard stop at 2, but I wondered if we had a couple of minutes just for some Q&A. I know Vic had one question. Vic?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. And it's great to be plugged back into the Smart Cities Alliance. This is great. Just had a quick question. Can partner agencies get client access to this effort that DOT and the MPO have started?
If you have a specific project that a consultant's working on, direct them to the ClearGuide website and have them fill out an application. When they provide their info, it'll get forwarded to either myself or to a team lead at Iteris. And if you let us know in advance that they're going to need access, we can just permit them in either as like a trial or for a specific period of time until the project wraps up.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks, Vic. I think I saw a question from Joe Bugle, but I can't see it. Is Joe still on the line?
Yeah, I was just responding to one of Vic's comment. Really, it was really in terms of the access to ClearGuide. I know we had looked at purchasing some, I guess a license for it for, I think it was really for everybody in the district and to use. And I mean, there's costs associated with it. Is the kind of, I guess, the full answer to Vic's question in terms of once the MPOs use, I guess they've paid for it up to a certain period, and then after that, we're kind of, I guess, looking at it now more like evaluating it and seeing how useful it is, and it's tremendously valuable. And then I guess going forward, the next steps will be how do we keep it going in terms of keeping the software available for everybody. So that was really all I was saying there.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Any other questions from around the group? No. Okay, Cheryl. Hand over to yourself.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, everybody. And it's a little hard to follow Johnny there. Was such a great program and exciting opportunity with that platform. One of the reasons that I wanted to bring this forward to the group today is just, when we look at that kind of a platform and the resources required to get access to it and to use it and make it functional, it's, that costs a considerable amount. And many public agencies, particularly the city of St. Pete, we just don't have the funding to kind of attribute to that. So, we need a good data platform. We need something that can be maintained. And so absent all those public resources, we need to integrate some of the resources from the private sector and some of their expertise and such. And so what I've found in the city to become a bit of a challenge is trying to get our chief technology officer and others in the on our IT side of the house to embrace some of the benefits that could come with better private sector integration. There's just a lot of concern about how far into the city's firewalls do we let third parties get, and there's they're always mindful of our city's data being held hostage or for ransom and those kinds of things. And so generally when I try to initiate conversations related to smart cities and some of the things that we could benefits that we can experience, much like what were mentioned in Johnny's presentation, I tend to get shut down a little bit because people are concerned that that's just too much access to our data, and the risks of that outweigh the potential benefits. And so I didn't know if other jurisdictions were struggling with this issue, if they've been able to overcome it. So I just that was what my conversation with Lee had been recently. Lee, does that cover everything?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. Be good to hear from others around the group in terms of whether you face similar kind of challenges around security, privacy, and how you've overcome those.
And as everybody's thinking, Phil, you may want to take back the control of your screen, I think, so your slides reappear.
Thanks, Alice.
Hi, it's Vic again. Just had a thing to share because this is kind of close to our experience, and Brandon can validate. We had some growing pains with our IT department as well, particularly around this issue. And there were two aspects to it. One was there a cloud-based system that we are connected to? If that were the case, what were the parameters and how would we work through that? And what worked for us is we eased our IT department in one case at a time. So it kind of started with the connected signals portal connection, where we're sending signal timings to a cloud-based portal, and it was a one-way connection. And we started by asking them, if we were to do this, how do you kind of walk them through it. They are anxious. And then the other is really educate yourself on all of their concerns and all of their policies. So typically IT departments will have cloud policies, they will have third-party policies, all of those things. It helps to be a little more informed about them yourselves. So when you speak to another vendor, you see a tool that you like, screen that for your IT department. That kind of reduces their anxiety. So I wish I had anything better, but it's really basic stuff like that.
That's helpful, Vic. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Johnny, did you have similar challenges in Hillsborough that you had to overcome in terms of being able to deploy the platform in the way that you have? You still there, Johnny?
Yeah.
I think he's trying, but his microphone's not picking up for some reason.
No worries. Is Beth on the line? If you have any experience, Beth, in terms of some of the security and policy issues and how to overcome those? Oh, Johnny is there. So, Johnny, I was just wondering in terms of some of the challenges that Cheryl has faced in terms of the security and privacy issues and related to the data protection, and how you may have had to overcome those within the MPO as well. Let's move on. The challenges with the audio don't seem to be working, but thankfully, Johnny said here data has no PI attached. Okay, cool. So there's definitely probably a follow-up conversation, Cheryl, with Vic, and see if we can explore that a little bit more in terms of how to address the challenges, and also follow up specifically on the regional platform that Johnny's run through to see if we can join some dots there.
Thanks, Lee. That's helpful. And I'll touch base with Vic. I think those are great suggestions. I might want to call him and talk a little bit more about that. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, over to Kelsey.
Yep, I'm here. So I guess from a Ford Pinellas perspective, we think that this tool that's being shown today is great, has a lot of potential. We're really interested, but when we kind of got together as a staff, we kind of took a step back and we kind of acknowledged that we have some current data that we'd like to be sharing in addition to, HERE data and ways and travel time reliability. We see a current need for sharing such things as VC ratios, AEDT, level of service, those kind of sources that we're currently already developing and maintaining, within each county. But we always get requests for, okay, well, great, this is happening here, but what's happening just over the border in the next county? And then often requires us to have to, send a few emails, track down the right people. Hopefully we even get the right people to be able to get those data sets. Those data sets are often in a different format than what we're working with. So we kind of see the need for some kind of ability to share, all this other great data, of course, but also some more basic data, coming with data dictionaries and maybe some similar file structures so that it's a little bit more easy to use, used by the MPO. And I didn't know if any of the other MPOs or other local governments also saw a need for that throughout the Tampa Bay region.
Thanks, Chelsea. Just opened out to the group as well in terms of, do you see a similar kind of need? I know this is something that Sean has touched on in the past. I don't know, Sean, have you any thoughts in terms of data dictionary or data structures that can support the region?
Sure. So I think, oops, sorry, I didn't get my camera facing the right way there. Yeah, so this is Sean Roberto from Cutter at USF. Yeah, I think this is certainly something other organizations around Tampa Bay and public and private have echoed is, and I think especially from the private sector who may not have contacts at public agencies and they just want to know like what data is available and how can we use it, and just tracing down where the data is, who to contact, having to fetch that kind of over and over and over again when you want fresh data. I think those are all definitely challenges that have been expressed by others. So it seems like maybe a simple place to start. And I know we've discussed this with Johnny in the past too. And I don't know if kind of the roadmap for some of the data platform that he's been working with, it includes this or not, but even just a directory of where to start and having links to public data that's available for agencies, or if it's not public, just contacts where people can reach out to get access to that data. I think that's, I can share just internally for our own purposes at Cutter, we started keeping a spreadsheet of some of those public data sets. I'd be happy to share that sheet. That's a Google sheet with the group, and if it would be awesome if others want to kind of help fill that out. And I think that's a great place to start. And maybe once we just catalog what's available, we can start looking at does it make sense to start hosting that somewhere, or what do the next steps look like?
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. I mean, years ago at the 7-county region, the Chairs Coordinating Committee, we had a website that we maintained, and people would upload, different data sources that then we could all use. But with staff changes and structural changes, that's kind of gone away. And I think that there would be some value in at least having some kind of directory to know where to go to get that information instead of trying to track down the right people within these different organizations.
Yeah, this is Margaret Kubelins. I like where all this is going in the conversation. One area, Sean, we've talked about it several times about even setting up a platform to share work zone, having the work zone data exchange is just, it's a little bit challenging to fully organize and facilitate that from the DOT's perspective, but we are opening up that conversation. We haven't hit a dead end yet. It's just there's a lot going on and a lot of initiatives. So we really appreciate Smart Cities Alliance being here and having the opportunity to participate and share information. But don't give up on the department being a player and assisting with that. I'm not sure what else to say other than that. I would love to make promises, and I would love that I had an actual path on how we can achieve that. Just haven't been successful in identifying exactly what that is. But our conversation is far from being dead from the DOT. We just aren't in a position to lead it yet because we just have a lot of other decisions that have to be made before we can say, okay, everyone get on board. Here's your platform. This is where we're going to host it. Share away. So don't give up.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the update. And for anyone who's not aware, so we've had in some of the past Tampa Bay Smart Cities Alliance meetings, we've had some discussion of there's a new US DOT format for sharing work zone information called WZDX. So Margaret and others at District 7 have been involved in trying to move forward to sharing that work zone data in this live format that's kind of open at a URL where anyone could go fetch it. And similarly, like some of the links that we're tracking in that spreadsheet I talked about are some of the public data sets and other standardized formats like GTFS for transit data and GBFS for scooter and bike share data. So yeah, if other, I know we've talked about this with Hillsborough County and City of Tampa too. So if others are moving towards publishing the work zone data in the WZDX format, I think keeping track of those URLs where those are published would be great too.
That sounds like a really positive step. I think we've talked just in recent times about utilizing Teams as a kind of central repository for a Smart Cities Alliance. Is that the sensible starting stop, Sean, to upload there and ask the Alliance members to start adding to that Google Sheet?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have the URL here to this Google Sheet. So I will share the Google Sheet in the chat here if you're able to see the meeting chat as part of this Microsoft team. Yes, absolutely. Feel free, if you're a member of an agency, feel free to come in here and add your agency and any contact. I don't actually have contact info actually looking at the sheet now, but I have URLs, so we can add a contact column here. And Beth Alden in the chat just said, what about using tvsmartcities.com website? And yeah, absolutely. I think that's, what's nice about the Google Sheet is that it allows us to collectively edit things quickly without having to ship back, spreadsheets over email. So there are ways that we can publish the output of the Google Sheet to a website. So we can look at, maybe we can publish an easily readable list on TampaBaySmartCities.com, but continue using the Google Sheet to add data to. So yes, I think that's a great idea. We'll utilize the website too.
Excellent, thank you. Any more on data and data availability before we move on? Excellent. Thank you, Johnny, Cheryl, and Chelsea. So we're going to move into the second half, really, or the final part of the agenda, and just get some theme updates. So, Brandon.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? So I was looking back at my calendar, just trying to remember the timeline of how things have unfolded over these last several months. Because if you're like me, a lot of recent history has faded into a blur. And so I was looking at when our last workshop was. It was February 11th. And a lot has obviously changed since then. And so I was trying to think of what has taken place as related to mobility as a service in order to give you all a proper update ever so briefly this afternoon. At that time, February 11th, last time I talked to you all, we had just initiated a transportation reorganization within the city of Tampa, and that is now complete. I believe I mentioned to you all before, Vic was obviously previously the Smart Mobility Manager. He moved into the Department Director role. I have completed the transition into the Smart Mobility Manager role since then. I'm glad, Vic, that you're able to join us this afternoon. But for the most part, I'll probably be the closest collaborator with the Smart Cities Alliance moving forward, and Vic will be included as much as his schedule allows. Other things that have changed since that time, transit and micromobility usage has dropped off. We've seen a little bit of a consolidation in the scooter market, even here within the city, with more or less a merger between two of the four scooter companies that we've got. You might wonder what that means for mobility as a service, whether it's still a priority for us. The answer is yes. We still would consider mobility as a service as key to our mobility strategy as a regional or from a regional perspective, as relates to the Smart Cities Alliance, as well as really from the city of Tampa's perspective. With the remote working and the processes within the city, the timelines that we've got, we may have shifted a little bit, but our ability to perform and continue to deliver on projects on schedule hasn't been diminished as much as you might want to think, considering all of the upheaval that we've seen. So the last time I talked, we said that the timeline would be probably this spring or summer. I would say we'll push that back a little bit for our pilot project, and I'll say summer to fall for the actual releasing of the requests for applications and getting those back. However, we have made some progress on it. The city and FDOT completed a legal review of the project participation agreement that formalizes our funding arrangements, and that's gone through City Council. That went through Thursday before last, and awaits the mayor's signature, and then it should go from there to FDOT to get that fully executed. So we've cleared a fairly significant milestone in the process, and we have engaged with our purchasing department to finalize our draft of the request for applications and get that out on the street. So not really a huge amount of information, I guess, to share with you all on our update, other than to say we are continuing to move forward. We still see it as a key strategy for us. We still want to lean into this pilot, even if that means the use cases that are covered by it may look a little different, because mobility in the area has just changed. The needs have changed a little, but people still need to get around. People will still continue to use different modes. We still want to tie those together, and we still see that as we see a return to normalcy, we want to be prepared in the best way possible to meet not only the needs of the moment, but the needs of the future. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Thanks, Brandon, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Any questions for Brandon? Okay. I think it's Ken next, I think.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who are new, I'm Ken Spitz. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager at District 7 for FDOT. And the theme that I'm going to talk about is reimagining infrastructure. Go ahead, yeah. There we go. So one of the areas that I'm a team leader on is mobility and innovation and transportation technology, the MIT team. And I just want to give you an update on some of the things that we're doing at FDOT and also in partnership with others. What you see on the screen here are 3 different areas that we focus on: safety, congestion, innovation. And then we had identified 3 different programs in each, or potential projects or initiatives in each. And the ones in green are the ones that we have gotten started, and we're going to talk about those today. Got some background noise there. Okay. First, let's talk a little bit about video analytics. So what do we mean by this is a project where we would have a vendor use cameras to take video of intersections or locations, and then we would, using computer algorithms and some of the video analytics that they have, find near miss or issues that maybe come up that don't show in crash reports or some of the other data that we collect, and then to help us develop countermeasures and other approaches to what might, to be able to be proactive so that situations don't become crashes. So we have teamed up with a vendor, and I can't say yet who, because we're working on negotiation with them right now. But so there's a project in scope development. We're looking at up to 10 intersections, and the pilot timeframe would be within 120 days. So we're hoping to start that up actually very soon. We're close, I think, on negotiation. Smart work zones was mentioned earlier, and I know that's going to be talked about later, so I'll skip that one. Innovative intersections. This is FHWA and some of the other states have done quite a bit with this. A lot of people think about this primarily with the interstates, and they think about DDI interchanges, but we're looking at surface streets, and we're looking whether they're smaller or larger. And we're coming up with different designs. There's a lot of different designs out there and tweaks that you can do. So we've actually done a couple of feasibility reviews, and one that we're involved in right now in northern Pinellas County is the US 19 corridor. So we finished up our major intersection look. We identified a 8-mile corridor, and we looked at 6 major intersections. We found that those can work. We can fit them within the existing right-of-way. So now we're looking at the entire corridor conceptual design so that we could cover all the side streets as well. So that phase has just begun, and we're hoping to maybe get that all done within, again, the next 3 to 4 months. We did do, earlier this year, we did a status update for the Pinellas MPO board on that, which, although there was some skepticism, I think it went fairly well. They gave us the go ahead. They said they were still interested in looking at the corridor level. And we actually are hoping to put together a field trip, so to say, down to District 1, where they have 3 different kinds of IID projects that have already been completed to show folks how they work. We're also looking into ramp metering. This is a study that we have underway. We're now entering phase 2 of that. The first phase was identifying priority segments along the interstate system, and we are looking at all interstates within D7. So once we identified those priority segments, now we're looking at interchange-specific conceptual designs within the priority segments. The intent of this is that we'll have a phased implementation plan at the end of the project with cost estimates assigned to it, so that upper management can have a way forward, whether we do TB Next or not, whether we do all of TB Next or not. We'll still have a plan at which ramp metering might be an option. An initiative that we're just getting started, and again, we're in scope development and negotiation phase on this, is a smart corridor study. So on this, what we're looking at is to identify potential technology toolkits for interstates, for regional arterial, and what we're calling principal arterial facilities. The idea here would be then that we would develop conceptual designs or visualizations for each of those 3 types, maybe pick 1 or 2 mile typical sections and show how the technology could be rolled out in those segments, what would be needed, and hopefully maybe give some ballpark cost estimates also. And then finally, earlier during the COVID-19 outbreak, we did do some traffic counts, some ground counts in the West Shore area, just because we wanted to see partly what the impact was in one of the larger commercial districts and also the residential areas that were around it. But we were also doing this as part of our Safe Trip initiative, which I know will be talked about later. We wanted, because a large part of that is travel demand management. So we thought teleworking, remote working, however you want to call it, is a great way to reduce the amount of volume that we have on our roadways, as we've all seen. So we wanted to get an idea of, well, if there's a large percentage of the population that's being told they can't go out, let's see how low the traffic volume gets during those periods so that we know what the upper range is that we have for TDM. So this kind of served 2 functions at the same time. So now what we're doing with the connected car data is we're working with a company. They're going to provide us data that matches up with the areas where we counted. And they're going to, with probe data, and they're going to be able to put this together, and we'll see analysis not just on volume counts, obviously, but how much demand was reduced, trip lengths, trip frequencies, trip purposes. We can figure out that kind of based on OD data, and put some more, I guess, meat on the bones of the ground counts that we did. So these are some of the areas that we're either working on currently or will be in the short term here. And as those get done, we'd be happy to come back and report our findings on those.
Excellent, thanks, Ken. Any questions for Ken? I see Johnny, you've got one. If the ramp meters move forward, will they be timed or managed by the TMC?
They will be smart ramp meters, so they will not be, well, they call them dumb meters, where they just go green, red in a set, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 seconds. We want these to be smart. So they will be not only demand responsive, but also controllable by the TMC. One of the ideas that we have is that they should be on all the time. In a lot of areas, they turn them off in off-peak, or they turn them off on weekends or overnight. We'd like them to be on full time, but that'll have to all be worked out if they're going to have TMC control.
Yeah, actually, this is Margaret Kubelins, and on those ramp meters, or ramp signaling is what they're trying to move towards, gravitate towards as far as the terminology, is there'll be sensors up on the main line, and once the speed drops to a certain level, then just like what Ken said, they'll start metering the traffic in and create gaps in the traffic that wants to merge in. And so they'll be able to merge much easier. The weaving and all that starts working together much better.
Excellent, thank you.
I see Leland had a question there also. Leland was asking, what is the purpose of the video analytics? The video analytics, well, for example, this might be a potential, if you had a location, say, near a school, and a school brought to us that they were having some issues with pedestrian and vehicle conflicts, whether they're in crosswalks or not, then by collecting some of this video data, we get a better idea. We actually see what is happening, as opposed to anecdotal evidence. Then, based on the frequency, the locations, we can come up then with some ideas. Is it a crosswalk? Do we need some sort of a signal? Do we need better signage? Those kind of things. Is it just education? That we need to instruct people better about how to operate it. We're also looking at downtown sections. We're looking commercial areas. We're looking we want to have one near USF. There could be some other colleges that we look at. Anywhere where we're getting that interaction with people, vehicles, and bicycles.
Excellent. Thanks, Ken. Any more questions for Ken? Okay, Alice.
Well, good afternoon. Everybody can hear me okay, I assume?
Yes.
All right, just making sure. I just got to hear one yes to know it's working, right? Hello, everyone. My name is Alice Price. I've met most of you pretty much several times now. I'm an in-house general engineering contractor to District 7, supporting the Tampa Bay Smart Cities Alliance and the MIT team that Ken just spoke about, and also the Tampa Bay Next program. And we spoke about this at our last meeting as well in February, this concept of Safe Trip. And I just wanted to remind everybody and kind of pull out the Smart Work Zone. Margaret, I'm going to turn it over to you to speak about one of your passions on the Smart Work Zones. But just to give everybody an overview once again of what Safe Trip is, the TRIP stands for the 4 initiatives that you see there on screen: traffic management, regional demand strategies, innovation, and public engagement. And from a DOT perspective, our internal leads are Margaret Kubelins, which you've heard from a couple of times now, and Dan Budens, who works with Margaret over in the TMC area at D7. So we got some great leadership over there. The traffic management side is somewhat of a complex side. I just wanted to give like a little update on each of the 4 areas. So in terms of traffic management, we're talking about mapping some of the existing initiatives that we already have going on with our AMP program, with the Integrated Corridor Management program, with finding some of the gaps in the system with some of the TB Next projects, and being able to identify adjacent projects that may serve as diversion routes to be able to assist. I didn't even say the basis for this whole program was obviously I know most people know that we received $1.4 billion to reconstruct the I-275 at SR60 interchange, which is a major interchange in our area. That's the convergence of several different systems, as well as the Tampa International Airport. So the basis for coming up with some sort of comprehensive plan was to obviously try to ease congestion, enhance safety. We immediately went to the smart work zone conversation of how that can help us through construction. We want to be a strong communicator, both ahead of time and through. So that was the reason that Safe Trip was pulled out. So forgive me for not saying that right up front. But that traffic management side I just mentioned, we're going to do some traffic analysis. We've already started developing the traffic control plan, that we call it that in the design phase, that will help us maintain traffic through construction. And we've already started to analyze that from a traffic perspective to start to to see where our pinch points are during construction, and are there certain elements that we need to introduce from a smart work zone or from a traffic operations perspective that will help make construction life a little bit easier and safer for all those that are using the work zone. The regional demand, we are working on, as Ken mentioned, the TDM strategies to figure out. Obviously, we've experienced some success with that over the last 2 months, and that's the timing of that. If it's horrible, is kind of good for an initiative like this, because it proves it can work, and it proves that it can take cars off the road, and especially if we have, a lot of commitment from our local businesses and chambers of commerce and things like that, where we can really get the most out of those partnerships. We're also working with the transit agencies, with HART, PSTA, and even Pasco County to determine what maybe some of those routes that we could make some enhancements along that would encourage transit use, as opposed to people driving through those corridors. So that's an important piece of that regional demand. I'm going to let Margaret talk about the innovation part, and I'll just go on to the public engagement side. We have, if you'll go ahead and switch over to the, well, actually, I don't have it on that next slide. You can go ahead and switch over to the next slide, is fine, though. The public engagement side, we are establishing a community advisory task force, and there are several folks that I saw your names in the list that have been invited to participate in that. We tried to keep the list very manageable. We're planning on meeting about 4 times over the next 12 to 18 months. And we really wanted it to be the folks that are in and around that interchange, recognizing, though, too, the importance of our regional partners outside that immediate interchange area. And we'll be doing some additional outreach and focus groups and small group meetings and surveys to make sure that we're fully reaching all those that would use this interchange, because it is of regional magnitude and not just a local project, for sure. So the Community Advisory Task Force, our first meeting is going to be next week. Hopefully, if you were invited to participate, you're able to do that. We're going to try to do it mostly virtually to continue with our theme of trying to keep people off the roads. And again, we're going to be meeting about 4 times. This will be the first time we've met. And then we would meet 3 more times throughout the project. Let me see what else I missed here. Focus groups and surveys, I got it. Margaret, you want to talk a little bit about the innovation side and smart work zones?
Sure, I'd be more than happy to. On the innovation side, we are trying to use technology as much as possible, and throughout the TBNX project and specifically when we get into smart work zones, we're very interested in being able to manage the speed of traffic and harmonizing the traffic through the work zones. Knowing that West Shore is going to be the big kahuna, so to speak, as far as the complexities, leading up to that, we'll have several pilot projects that we'll be implementing to test some of our theories. We've already, earlier today, we had a conversation about deploying some smart work zone technologies on Gateway, which is really, the Gateway project is close to wrapping up, but this is, it's technically section 2, but part of Gateway. So it's on the Pinella side. Very interested in finding ways to manage speed. Do I have any slides? Probably not.
No, sorry, I didn't. It was just supposed to be a quick overview. I just thought you might want to talk about the pilot projects.
Yeah, so we'll have sensors out there. We're looking at having variable speeds that we will not necessarily have to use to enforce the speed limit as much as advisory speed limits for the traveling public to help smooth out and harmonize that speed. Ideally, we could get them down to 35 miles an hour. As most planners, you understand that around 35 miles per hour is our optimum capacity of vehicles that we can serve. And so in order to reduce the amount of backup and the rear end crashes or secondary crashes associated with any kind of queues, we would have automated information that is a library of messages that we'd be able to put on changeable message signs. Yeah, thanks, Alice, for putting me on the spot.
My pleasure, Margaret. You did great.
Yeah, I know. I just could have used a slide or two.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. But I'm really excited because I don't know how many people know, but I am taking a new position over in project management. And what that does allow me to do is to take a lead on the overall transportation management plan that we'll be doing. So also, as far as Smart Cities Alliance, is really important for us to have the opportunity to engage with local government and the regional governments in order to deploy all of this, because it's going to take a collaborative effort for all of this to be successful, for the overall public to be able to have the best traveling experience during this expansion time for us. We'll be under construction a long time, so it's going to be painful, and we're finding ways to soften the pain or kind of spread it out for everybody. So
that's right.
Excellent. Thank you, Alice and Margaret. Any questions on Safe Trips Smart Work Zones from around the group? Awesome. Well, firstly, thank you for all of you attending, and in particular the speakers for their contributions and developing their content. In terms of next steps, we'll be working on the Teams site, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll certainly make the slides and hopefully the recording of this session available. In terms of actions, if you do have any questions, any follow-up feedback, please feel free to reach out to me or the speakers direct. If you would like access to ClearGuide, I think the feedback from Johnny was that is feasible, and just request it through the NPO's ClearGuide site, and maybe we can share a link to that in the team site as well. Vic and Cheryl are going to follow up around lessons learned around security and privacy of data, and Sean has already shared the Google Sheet around the data list, but we'll look to get that circulated as well, so we can get even more sources of data and contact points visible, and also reflect on Beth's idea around getting some of that on the Alliance website. So without any further ado, I thank you, and hopefully we'll speak soon. Keep safe, everyone.
thank you, Lee.
Bye, everyone.